Welcome to If the Public Only Knew, the show that pulls back the curtain on what it really takes to build and lead a business. Host Gary Cinderbrandt sits down with some of today's most dynamic CEOs, founders, and leaders to dig into their origin stories, hard-earned lessons, and the missteps that nearly derailed it all. These are unfiltered, no-hype conversations designed to inspire, challenge, and fuel your own journey. Now here's your host, Gary Cinderbrandt.
Welcome back to If the Public Only Knew. I'm your host, Gary Cinderbrandt. And today, our guest is someone from I wouldn't call it an arcane area of finance, but an area of finance that is incredibly necessary and really exists to kind of help companies pull their feet out of the fire. We welcome today Jim Martin of ACM Capital, turnaround specialist and all-around smart guy. Jim, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Gary. Pleasure to be with you.
So, Jim, your background, I noticed, undergraduate, graduate degree, I think at Emory, always kind of led, even though you may not have realized it, always kind of led to where you are, this path that you were on. It's almost like there was a predefined road you were going to follow, although it was probably a little unclear the stops along the way you would make, where today your company specializes in essentially restructuring companies that have gotten themselves in trouble one way or another. But take me through that evolution, if you would. You graduate college, you sit for the CPA test,
right,
with no intention of becoming a CPA. How does that all work? Walk me through that.
So, Florida was one of the first schools, or first states, I should say, that required, call it the maximum amount of hours to sit for the CPA exam. In fact, many people who sat for the CPA exam and who perhaps studied accounting in undergrad and whatnot in Florida, they would take the CPA exam in other states because Florida's requirements were so rigorous. So I liked that because I liked going to where it was rigorous and saying I took 36 hours of mid-level accounting courses and up, right? So first 10 hours are nothing, but then the next 36 hours are where the real meat of the studying is. So that is what I did, and I sat for the CPA exam, passed it the first time, and back then, by the way, it was 19 hours over 2.5 days, no calculators. Everything was longhand on your math. So it was a really interesting time to do that. But yeah, so started my career in banking, spent the majority of my 20s in that career. It was the best training ground I could have possibly asked for, given where I ultimately ended up.
How did the banking thing come about? Where did that come from?
I came out of undergrad. I was hired by a relatively small commercial bank in South Florida, and this is in the mid 80s rather. And it's not, back then you didn't have a lot of money center banks. You certainly didn't have any in Florida. So I went with a group that was, I think the oldest officer in the bank was 35.
Okay.
Right. So really young, energetic, forward-thinking group of guys. And so, one of the CEO of the bank took me under his wing. I worked all facets of banking operations, financial reporting. I handled the audit. I handled the bank regulators. I mean, I handled everything. And he would throw me in way over my head. And
now, with what interest rates were doing back in the early 80s, I imagine that was a pretty unusual initiation to the banking industry.
Totally. It's so funny, right? Because here we are. I mean, we're not close to where they were in the 80s, but to your point, I was handling the investment portfolio for the bank, and you had 30-year bonds, you had 10 years, You had, I mean, Fed funds, overnight funds were, in the eights, so it was really a crazy time. I mean,
Were
you
you
had,
were you required back then to mark your bond portfolio to market?
no,
Thank God.
no, I know,
Would
I
have been
know.
bad.
But you know what's funny? I mean, so when Fannie and Freddie were taken over, and I'm sorry, I'm digressing a bit, but again, I was well versed in a bank's balance sheet from those days. And I couldn't believe that they took this thing into conservatorship and blew out the preferred stock of both Fannie and Freddie. And the reason I say that is because banks were allowed to keep the preferred of GSEs, Fannie and Freddie's, as part of their capital structure. So in one fell swoop,
I
in
remember that.
'08, they wiped out, I mean, hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars of capital in
Yeah.
banks across the country. Unintended consequence. But in any event, there I am in banking, and in my 20s, I meet a guy during the course of that career who helped the bank turn around their capital structure, management, et cetera. I was the only one that had spreadsheet experience back then. So the guy took me under his wing. I basically followed him around like a dog on a bone, and learned a lot of what he was doing, what he was seeing. And we ultimately sold the bank. We did well on the sale. I followed one of the executives to a new bank in South Florida. He then threw me into the deep end of an awful subsidiary that they had acquired prior to his arrival. I turned that around, and the next thing I knew, and it's too long of a story, but I found myself in Eastern Europe in '93 with a colleague of mine, helping him resuscitate or turn around a fledgling fast food franchisee that had raised money in the States and had gone over to Poland thinking they were going to be able to conquer the world. So that is when the fun really began, because in Poland, this is '93, you had
Right.
hyperinflation, you had, privatization on steroids. You had multi-currency. The euro had not been launched yet. And you had the Russian mob, which was very prominent in Warsaw and other, cities in Poland. So it was a really interesting time. And there was a lot of guys, a lot of expats that I knew at that time. And this is another thing, Gary, that I've learned in my career, and that I've come across this so often. And it's no shot on anybody from Ivy League schools, but so many of these expats that were there at the time had come in from Ivy League schools, and they crashed and burned, quite candidly. It's just, I mean, it was just so unorthodox, and it was so, I mean, it was hand-to-hand combat day in and day out from a business standpoint.
Sounds fun.
Because, well, it was, I mean, but you didn't know one day from the next. I mean, I'll give you an
Yeah.
example. We signed a 20-year land lease, ground lease, for a Burger King in downtown Warsaw, and the next morning we had a Russian mob take over the space. So I had to go to my attorneys who were at Hunton and Williams and say, look, I got these guys in the space. What the hell do I do? He says, we'll take it back. So we brought our own guys in and literally took the space back. Yeah, we gave them money, we gave them cash,
Right.
but we bought their loyalty. But that's the kind of thing you had to do.
Yeah.
Right. So took the business from, at the time, there were six Burger King stores and 3 Domino's. And ultimately, when we sold it in 7 years later, there were 25 Burger Kings and 17 Domino's.
Wow. So
And
let's jump forward a little bit. ACM Capital, looks like you got started right around the financial meltdown.
I did. I had just come out of a 6-year turnaround with an aviation company in South Florida. Was hired by the private equity guys in December of '01. So this was a company that was well over 100 million in revs, doing over 20 million in EBITDA. September 12th, you could have shot a cannon through the maintenance facility and not hit a soul. And so the business, was in deep, deep trouble. We had 98 million of debt in default. I mean, it was a mess. And so it took 6 years we first restructured the balance sheet, did some other things, had to take the employee base from 800 to 400, early on. Ultimately, sold the business and did exceptionally well. The new money got out at about a 38% IRR. All of the old money, so all the equity was wiped out. All the old money got back whole. So it was a great, result. But I started ACM in August of '08, and the reason I did, obviously knowing that we were going to be hitting a major problem in our economy, but also I didn't want to be stuck in a particular industry that, despite my efforts to turn the business, it would have been, pointless because the industry was wiped out, right?
What was the event you saw coming? Was it the two Credit Suisse hedge funds that crashed?
It was actually Bear Stearns.
No, the two Bear Stearns funds. I'm
Bear
sorry, you're
Stearns.
correct.
Yeah.
You're
Yeah.
correct.
Bear Stearns was I want to say it was June of '08, if not
Yeah, I
July.
think you're right. That was the
Yeah,
two canaries in the coal mine.
that's exactly right. Exactly. And
Um,
and so that was my first, and then the other thing was I remember reading in Barron's on the GSEs and how the government was thinking of putting them into conservatorships. And then I saw at that point, like I told you about, the capital and the impact on banks' capital if they were to do that and wipe out preferred. So, there was two or three things that got me, of the belief that we were going to be in deep trouble, for a period of time. So that's when I formed my own firm. It's now just past my 17th year. I started in eight of eight.
are you
Uh,
called in? Are you normally called in by the debt holders?
it varies. Sometimes I've been called in by the equity. I've sometimes by the creditors. There's been several cases where it was, second or third generation that stepped in, and we know stories, I'm sure, together
Yeah.
where the second and third generation aren't exactly the most motivated or the swiftest of foot, right? So you come in and then you deal with egos that have no business being there. So, it's just been a combination of different stakeholders.
How do you handle the conversation with, let's say, a second or third generation owner when you tell them that the only way forward is the equity's got to get wiped out?
It's a great question. I, honestly, I guess given some of the things that I had experienced, be it Eastern Europe, be it, what was going on in the aviation space, I was always very direct. And the thing was, Gary, I didn't care if they said, well, we can't, you got to go. I'd be saying, it's great. I've got a place to go. I mean, I've got another place to be. So that's fine. But if you want to hear the truth, this is what you're looking at. And oh, by the way, you have a chance to recover and then some. But you got to trust the process and you got to trust me.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny sometimes. We were quoting The Hunt for Red October before we started.
Yeah.
And, I always remember that. And there's some similarities, not directly to what you're doing, but in my business, um, for financial advisors to be super successful, you have to figure out where you best align with your clients. And you can only, some of them might not even have a lot of money, but you just kind of get along with them and you're going to be with them for a very long time. The ones you don't, it doesn't really work out with, are the ones you kind of have to move off to somebody else. And it's the equivalent of you're cutting off a piece of your soul in
Right.
doing that. These are people you brought on board years and years ago,
Yep.
but you've got to have that commitment. So as when Cortez got to the New World, first thing he did was burn the ships.
That's it.
And
That's it.
lesson well learned.
Yeah.
Uh, the only path is forward. And I
Right.
think that's one of the marks, Jim, of a true entrepreneur. You'll figure it out. It doesn't, you're not sure what it's going to be. You'll solve a problem, then another problem's going to come up.
That's
Then you'll
exactly
fix
right.
that, and then you'll see something else. And eventually you get to the point you go, wow, how'd I get that fixed?
Right.
I mean, it's
I've asked myself that many times.
I'm a big fan of the Weir books, The Martian and the new movie that's coming out, Project Hail Mary. So I was
Yep.
watching The Martian, I think, for the third time. And at the end of the movie, where Matt Damon, who plays the guy they rescue, is talking to a group of new astronauts, the question is, will space kill you? He goes, the answer is yes. So you settle on that, and then you work the problem.
Yeah, right. Work
Right?
backwards. Yeah.
Then
Yeah.
work the next problem, then the
Yeah.
next problem, then the next
Yeah.
problem. And your life is literally now your company, ACM, is defined by working the problems that you didn't create.
Right.
So in that realm, how does ACM, if you're in there restructuring a company, is it done by fee? Is it done by time? Is it done by success? How do you price something like that?
That's a great question. It's so when I started it, Gary, I look, I had been working around guys. I mean, I didn't even cover, a company called Mosler Safe between Eastern Europe and the aviation company that was a year and a half in Ohio. I was working for a private equity firm there, a lot of fraud. But point is that, you know, you 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 look at different situations and you're you're in you're in situations that, to your point, you didn't create, and you're trying to convince people who have big egos, that they either have to step aside, or more importantly, they got to let other people go to whom they're very loyal,
Right.
right? And that's a tough sell. But you got to be able to convince them that if not, the thing's going to collapse. But as far as pricing is concerned, I was always around big restructuring firms because the businesses I was in was, they're 250, 400 mil in revs. So, you would bring in Alvarez and Marcel and some of the big workout guys, all for fees, all for hourly rates for the most part. So I came in '08 and I said, no, I'm going to do it based on success. I'll take a relatively nominal, downstroke, and you and I are going to agree on, on the deliverables. If I do this, if I do this, if I do this, I get Y. And then, oh, by the way, if we get the equity resuscitated, then I get a piece of that equity too.
I imagine that, especially when they had to deliver bad news, or there were some loyalty issues or some fear of pulling the trigger, knowing you were in the boat
Yeah.
probably made that a little bit easier because, again, you do have a vested interest,
Yep.
and it's almost as if you're working at that firm instead of for that firm.
Yep.
Big difference in how people would perceive that.
Totally.
Also, if it were me on the other side of that transaction, I would say to myself, okay, so this guy's going to put his time and his expertise in. He believes we can come out on the other side, and he's literally putting his money up to do so.
Yeah. That's exactly
So,
right.
yeah, I imagine that's going to be a much more effective sale than bringing in the big workout guys who are going to get a fee no matter what they do and really not care.
Right.
Do you think in approaching it that way, Jim, it allowed you to take a more humane approach in some of these dealings?
I do. I do. And you to your point, you do have a vested interest in more ways than one, right? I mean, you're aligned, financially, that's for sure. But you start to the human aspect, I think, is more pronounced in situations like that. So you're like, back to the second generation, third generation, I'm having dinner with the family. I'm having dinner with the husband and wife, right? And they've put everything into it, right? And let's say '08. I mean, I had companies in South Florida in 9 and 10 that were in the construction space, right?
Sure.
That were, I mean, super successful. And then they were completely underwater. And you had lenders at the time who were breathing down their neck, and these guys just had no idea how to deal with it.
What
Uh,
were some of what are some of the warning signs? People who are in the middle market space, running their own firms, they've been out there for a while. What are some of the early warning signs leadership should pay attention to?
for warning signs as to
That they're heading for rocky shores.
for rocky shores. Okay. So Well, firstly, I would say, God, there's so many of them that I've encountered and that I've tried to educate people on. Um, One is when the bank starts to tighten their grip on their credit. So it doesn't necessarily mean you're in default. Doesn't even necessarily mean that you've done anything wrong per se, but you have more scrutiny. You have workout guys that are all of a sudden hovering about, because they anticipate problems. So that's one that candidly people miss. But then, when you look at the industry in which one operates, um, you'll see signs. I mean, let's say pick construction, right? You got one case, I had a big concrete pumper. And let me tell you, that is a lucrative business when construction is going well. Because you're the one I mean, you're the lifeblood, pardon the pun, but you are, right? I mean, you're bringing the concrete in, pouring it, from the trucks, and that business is vital to, to seeing buildings going up. Well, when the concrete pumper stops showing up or is not, all of a sudden you don't see them very much, or the one that, let's say you're on the lending side, all of a sudden you're not seeing financials from them, you're not seeing performance from them. That leads to an you know what, as far as the industry and what's, a portent of things to come.
Yeah. And
You know,
imagine a cascading effect right on down the road.
totally. Yeah, totally. I mean, I was in a tier two automotive supplier in mid '08. In the beginning of the year, the North American forecast was 16 million vehicles, new vehicles. We
Beginning of
ended,
'08.
yep, we ended '08 at less than 8 million produced. By the summer of '08, I'm in this company in upstate New York, and we're looking at, we're doing a 13-week cash flow forecast. I had a couple of guys with me. They were doing it. We were looking at it with management every day. And we could see the trends of slow pay on our customers, right? All the telltale signs, but it's real time. You're
Yeah.
seeing week after week a degradation of collections, and it's across the board. So in that case, we ended up taking out a good portion of the labor, probably 90 days before everything hit the fan. I'm talking June of '08. But it's because we saw, the trends from a pure cash flow standpoint. So
Last
there's a
question.
lot of different ways that one, can see that if they're willing to
Sure.
look.
So when you know something's headed rocky, the bankers are hanging around, and you're looking at the balance sheet and you're saying, look, we've got to restructure this thing. Does it help the company if you're then representing them to the bank on the
Totally.
workout, or representing them to the lenders?
Yes. In fact, the lenders prefer it.
Yeah.
They prefer it, right? Because they're going to get the straight answer. They're not going to get a lot of hemming and hawing. Also, I've been in their shoes, so it's a much, and I tell my clients that, it's, trust me, it is much better for me to be your mouthpiece, if you will, to these lenders than for you to try to go it alone.
It's a fascinating business. You enjoying it?
I love it. I mean, I really do. I love it. People say, "Oh, when are you going to retire?" I say, "I'm not. I'm
Why
not."
would you?
Right. I mean, it's a blast.
Yep.
Great. I mean, there's been great stories. I tell people, in the case of the aviation company, I mean, when I sold it, we had 1,200 employees, which was triple what we had when I first stepped in. And I say, 1,200 employees, I basically multiply that by three, right? And because some people have five in their family,
Yeah.
some people are single, right? You multiply it by three, you've saved 3,600 people's careers, lives, however you want to put it, right? And there's nothing more rewarding than that.
It's a great feeling. I mean, sometimes tough decisions have to be made, but you've got to be able to see it through to the other side. And I know if you're stuck in the middle of a failing business, you don't even know what tomorrow's going to bring, much less think things are going to move to the other side. I've had some guests on my show that One in particular, I recall, the founder of Lovesac,
Mm,
who basically started selling pillow beanbag chairs in college and turned that into a multi-million-dollar business. They raised a whole bunch of capital, opened up a whole bunch of retail stores. The economy got soft.
yep.
Yeah, the worst day of his life was at 4 a.m. He's in there with a sawzall, taking down his fixtures at these 8 or 9 stores. Went through a bankruptcy, rebuilt it, and he is one of the happiest guys I've ever seen. He said he had great stewardship. He had great leadership. He said he had a great workout guy
Yeah.
that helped him get restructured.
Yep.
And now his attitude is, I'm just having so much fun building this, the coolest furniture anybody's ever seen. He's listed on the NASDAQ and he's just enjoying himself. So I think about if Sean hadn't have made that through, what would the impact have been on all his employees?
I was just going to say that.
And
Yeah.
I think you're doing a great thing. I really do.
Yeah.
It's wonderful.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Yeah. Real quick on that Lovesac.
Sure.
My wife and I, we were in Dadeland Mall, one of the malls in South Dade, and we came upon Lovesac. God, it has to be 12, 14 years ago. Is that right? I mean, the way that sounded about
Yeah,
right.
he's been around.
Early on.
Yeah.
And we came upon it, and I think it was the first retail location in South Florida, and we were like, wow, this is really cool stuff. Then just 3 weeks ago, I saw Lovesac in a mall in I don't know where I was, but it was a high-end mall. And I'm like, oh my God, this product has just, I mean, it is amazing today.
He builds the coolest stuff.
I'm telling you.
Integrated high-end speaker systems literally in your couch.
No, I mean, I saw it. it's funny we're talking about that because I actually want, if not pressed for time, I wanted to go in and just kind of look at all the different things they've done to improve that.
And we talked about his quality and his sound engineering and the whole thing. And he just wants to put great product out there.
It's fantastic.
And he puts it out there with a lifetime guarantee. And it's a great story. And it reminds me of, without someone like you,
yeah,
Sean Nelson never rescues that company.
Yeah,
and brings himself through. Jim, thank you so much for joining me today. It really
Gary,
is
my pleasure.
Fascinating area.
Yeah.
If anyone needs your services or wants to talk to you, how do they find you?
Sure. So the website is ACM Capital Partners. As I said, we've been around since 08. I've been around a lot longer than that. Our main number is 305-960-8851. You can reach me at jmartin@ACM Capital Partners. I always respond. And one more thing, my cell phone is 305-978-0720.
Jim, thanks so much for joining us today.
Gary, thanks for having me. Been a pleasure.
Listening to Jim Martin of ACM Partners, restructure and workout specialist. Thanks for tuning in. This is Gary Cinderbrand for If the Public Only Knew. We'll see you on the next podcast.
Thanks for tuning in to If the Public Only Knew. Don't forget to follow the show and share it with anyone who's ready for the real raw stories behind the business successes. Join Gary next time for another powerful conversation that will leave you inspired and ready to take action.